Okay, without further ado, I want to kind of like start at the beginning. How did this group came about? Well, it came about because Mark, Christine, and I were invited to a conference on catastrophic risk, or Christine at least was, and she wanted to provide a decentralized approach and a decentralized alternative to many of the existential risks that we are all worried about. Where oftentimes I think the tools that we have in our hand are still very legacy institution laden and still very much rely on these institutions. And she was like, "Hey, let's get a paper together in which we can actually provide a future of decentralized cooperative approaches to existential risk." And we did that, and then we started talking, and through lots of discussions, eventually we're like, "This is a much larger thesis than really fits into a paper," and it spiraled into a book that Mark, Christine, and I have been writing, I think now 3 years ago, in weekend sessions, always meeting every, I think, Saturday or Sunday for 3 hours. And those were really the most cherished hours of these years that I had. It was a ton of fun. And I think we started on one thread, and really, I think it became quite, quite a meta approach of how we can use decentralized approaches to secure cooperation to reach Pareto-tropian futures on the long run. And so it became a really hopeful, optimistic book that I think packages many of the topics that Foresight's individual technical groups really care about in a really nice concept. So it's kind of like a meta approach of like, how can we make better progress in a decentralized way toward the futures that many of our other technical groups are working on. So that as a little preamble of like, how came this group about? Obviously, as we were writing the book, we also realized, well, there's already lots of people that we reference that are working on these approaches. So maybe one really cool way to actually infuse the ideas that we bring forward with life is actually starting a group around them and have people present their individual work already for the ones that we reference, and have that again inform the book that we're writing. So we wanted to have it from the get-go, a living, breathing document that is informed by the work that all of you guys are doing, that in fact we are all referencing in the book. So this very much became very quickly a pretty quirky community project. So thank you all, for many of you, for being there really from day one for this. It was a ton of fun. It was crazy at times, and I've learned a lot this year. It was really a crash course in decentralized approaches to cooperation. We have lots more people joining. I will share a little bit more about the actual resources that you can see here in the chat in a second. But I think, to give you a really quick overview before we popcorn out into things that you thought were of most interest to you, really where we started in the book and where we started with the seminar summaries. Basically, if you click on the seminar summaries that I'll share with you in a second, you will get a direct link to all of these seminars. But we started out with Pareto-tropian concepts with Mark Miller here. And this is really one, I think, that I really point you out, guys. Our note-takers have done a fantastic job at capturing just really what is this book about, and what is Pareto-tropianism about? How can we reach those preferences? How can we actually cooperate in a decentralized way much better toward positive long-term futures? So I invite all of you guys to really check out the first summaries if you want to get a good overview of the ideas in the book. So that is this one here. But we started out really with, okay, values differ. We can't really agree on values. So what can we do in the face of this? We went through more economic concepts of cooperation with fantastic economists, including a Nobel Prize winner. Then we ported them into the digital world with Balaji Srinivasan and the network state, which many of you really, really loved this presentation. We asked how we can make Asia a little bit more open, how we can open up Asia to cooperation. We asked, how is it that people don't really know about the progress that we're making with Tyler Cohen? We asked how we can create better blockchain governance systems in the digital world with Arthur Brightman and Mark Stiegler. We had Glenn Whale on quadratic funding as decentralized alternatives to the public goods that many of us here care about. We had Alex Tabarrok, who was working on dominant assurance contract before crypto was even a thing, and to just provide alternatives to how can we make people cooperate better in decentralized ways without having to only rely on the legacy institutions that many of us, I think, are realizing the holes in. We discussed split contracts. So obviously, as we're moving into the system of cooperation, we won't get there tomorrow. So on the way, we need to find ways in which we can actually port the current infrastructure gradually into the emerging world of crypto commerce. Maybe one of them is split contracts with a mix between legal contracts and cryptonomic contracts. We had zero knowledge enabled cooperation. So why is it that we need to get much better at privacy preserving cooperation? And we had a really big discussion on a variety of different DAO experience, inter alia Vita DAO, who is now a big part of our longevity efforts as well, and to just discuss alternative ways of actually doing the funding that many of us care about. We had prediction and replication markets as really one of the things that Foresight and Foresight adjacent folks have already cared about. Robin actually set up a first prediction market at our annual member gathering in, I think, 1999, where people actually voted by sending checks to our offices. And so that was a really good, I think, recap of all of this. And so now we have replication markets, all of those. And so we went through a few of these and saw what we can do to improve this. Then we discussed, okay, we're not going to get there tomorrow. How can we actually peacefully transition into this ecosystem in which we can cooperate across humans using smart contracts in a way where we don't upset the legacy institutions too much, where we can have a genetic takeover, so peacefully transition into this world. We then discussed, this was a big one, we had Daniel Ellsberg here from who co-authored Doomsday Machine and released the Pentagon Papers, and what started as a one-hour seminar spiraled into 3 hours, where he was just really in a terrifying and really inspiring way, at the same time hammering down the problem of that we still face with nuclear risks, and really just getting the point across that the current security infrastructures that we all rely on are really not up to the task. And so that started then our chapter where we moved into more, okay, we not only want to get better at cooperation, but we also clearly have a lot of risks that we have to worry about, by which we also have to have lots of resilient architectures in place to actually avoid the risks that many of us are worried about on the long run. We then moved into more of the multipolar active shield part of the book and really ask about, okay, what are risks that we're facing in the long run? One, for example, that was pointed out by David Brin was really the threat that surveillance will probably become much more omnipresent in our lives, and whether we can find ways in which we can counter surveillance with surveillance, or perhaps even with encrypted ways of having monitoring done in a much more proficient way, which is still privacy preserving and multipolar, so that individual monitors can monitor each other. A very, very difficult, I think, line to walk, and we will probably discuss more on that, because that is, I think, the hardest part really in the book to do this right, but it's a future that we may not be able to avoid. We had Kate Sills, one of our Foresight fellows, really mind melding our brains with a presentation on different ways in which we can re-engineer property rights using NFTs. And then we moved from cooperation across humans to the risks that we face from also malicious actors being able to cooperate better and being actually able to destroy more actors with less resources. And then we moved into, okay, if we manage to cooperate better across humans, if we manage to preserve the kernel of cooperation that we have across humans, then what does it mean to port the systems into a future in which we cooperate more with artificial agents? We had Gillian Hadfield here, who talked about incomplete contracts and AI alignment. And so basically, how can we use the current cooperative frameworks that we have with legal frameworks to extend to artificial agents? We had a new approach to of how we can just increase our understanding of what it even means to be intelligent with David Krakauer. We had Peter Norvig here for a fantastic discussion of AI and what it means to actually have a modern approach to this. And then we took it one leap out further and discussed, okay, now if we manage to cooperate better with artificial intelligences, then can we have a way in which we can have humans actually still be relevant? And we discussed Inheritance Day, which is a way in which we can potentially have a universal basic capital by trading on the expected value of space resources for space exploration. And so having that as a way for humans to stay relevant in a more increasingly intelligent way. We had a fantastic presentation also from Gernot Heiser on just the importance of computer security here. And then we took it all the way out there to what it would mean to not only cooperate with artificial intelligences, but also perhaps with other intelligences, including future civilizations that we may or may not encounter in outer space. And so we had a very, very long leap, started with cooperation across humans. How can we better this? How can we secure it? How can we port it into a system of AI intelligences? And then all the way out, how can we make this also palpable in a world with many other intelligences? Again, if you click on any of these, you get redirected to the seminar summaries. But we also had a few fellow discussions that I just want to point you out, and a few of our fellows are actually here, and we hear from them in a second. But I think all of that is really just to say that what started as a book, where we then went through chapter by chapter, really every month releasing a new chapter, suddenly flourished into this community of lots of individual people presenting their actual work in the individual chapters that we discussed. So thank you a lot for staying there with us, for presenting your work, for making the ideas that we had in this book really really flourishing and really alive. And I think now I really want to hear, perhaps to bring it down from Christine and Mark maybe at first, and then from all of you guys, just what do you think about, if you think about the current book title, which may still change, Intelligent Voluntary Cooperation, how can we secure it, and how can we give decentralized alternatives to the current infrastructure of cooperation that will gradually lead us into more and more Pareto-topian futures? What are like the individual topics? What are your highlights? And perhaps, Mark, we start with you. What were your highlights this year? What do you want to draw people's attention to as we move into the next year?
First of all, just a brief note on the title. Over Thanksgiving break, when I tried to explain the book to my family, and I started with the title, Intelligent Voluntary Cooperation, I realized very quickly that the title is missing the main framing. It was a great title for this group, where we're already all in the frame of thinking about radical futures enabled by high technology and thinking long term. But outside of this group, you say intelligent voluntary cooperation without that framing, and it's just very hard to proceed from there. So I think we need to keep, so once you're in that frame, intelligent voluntary cooperation, I think, is the organizing theme of the book, and we need to keep it. But somehow we also need to set the right expectations, that we're not talking about, the next 5 years and immediate politics or whatever. The other thing that I find myself wanting to see more, thinking we should have emphasized more, is a perspective on rule of law. That the last few centuries, we've gotten a taste of rule of law. Most of human history before then has been various forms of tyranny. But I say it's just a taste of the benefits of rule of law, because the systems of government that have given it to us have been so bad at it that it's only sort of enough of a taste that we get a sense of what the benefits could be. And those systems of rule of law have been based in geographic jurisdictions, which are now mostly irrelevant to how we interact with each other. The world of blockchain-based smart contracting, the world of computer security, the world of modern cryptography with privacy-preserving technologies, all of these things composed together can give us a jurisdiction-free rule of law that is available to everyone in the world, is incorruptible to a degree that human institutions have never been able to be incorruptible in the past, can be neutral and predictable and less ambiguous. And there are tremendous problems that we still, technical problems and political problems that we still need to surmount to get from here to there. But I think that rule of law is really a very central theme to what it is that the future that we're building towards can achieve, such that we look back on the systems currently called rule of law and see it as only a dim approximation of what we'll be able to achieve.
Lovely. Christine, do you want to share a few words?
Yes, thanks, Allison. So looking back on the year, I think that recap Allison just did makes me realize, oh my God, what an extraordinary year this has been in this group. It's stunning. The way I think about it, first we need to address the insecurable foundations of our computing. And of course, we had presentations on SEL4 and on Agoric. And so with object capabilities, that's a start to bring insecurability to secure foundations. The blockchain and DAO talks are helpful in pointing out that we're beginning to build an alternative governance parallel structure. It's starting to emerge. Super encouraging. And also, of course, the blockchain space has created a lot of new wealth, which is flowing into these important projects, whether it be the work of this group, the longevity group, any number of really visionary goals. So that's also super encouraging. We look out into society, we see dysfunction. We are beginning to address that with the Sprightly Institute project. The Foresight Fellow, Christine Lemmer-Weber, now did that with Randy Farmer, who's part of the longtime Foresight community. So this is an example of Foresight's intergenerational emphasis, right? There's knowledge locked away. We need to combine that with the new knowledge and the extreme energy provided by our younger generation to actually get things done in the real world. And then just at the Vision Weekend, I got to meet a lot of you often for the first time, including the guys from Protocol Labs. I had never met them in person before. And that makes me realize if there's any way that we can pull it off, we really need to do more in-person meetings. So looking forward to 2022, I think if we just can continue the momentum we've got, that will be huge. To me, the text summaries of the talks are absolutely critical. There's just no way people are going to watch the giant number of videos that we are generating. A text summary is the way to pull them into this world of ideas that we're building in many cases. So, and I mentioned we need to meet in person. At the Vision Weekend, we were kicking around the idea of a decentralized web workshop. I would love to see that in 2022. I would love to see an object capability workshop in 2022, if we can pull those off in person. So just to wrap, at the Vision Weekend, I was privileged to interview Jan Tallinn, and we talked about the role of this type of work in a larger civilization context. He sees society as a multi-agent system. He asks, how can we make it more resilient toward disruption? How can we build a more robust civilization? That's what we're doing in this group. That's what this is about. And it doesn't matter how great the technology is in other areas, right? Longevity tech won't do us any good if civilization is falling apart. So that's what we're working on here. I think it's super important, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of it.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, I think to foreshadow a little bit like what the next year looks like, Jazia Brooks, who's a Foresight Fellow, he got super excited about the ideas in the book and wanted to do a discussion group on the book. So in the next year, we'll be going chapter by chapter through each chapter and just really having your guys' feedback on individual parts of the book. We also have Keith Mansfield, I think, here on the call, who agreed to take a look at the book. And Keith has before that done a fantastic job at a variety of different other books, including one from Robin Hanson and one from Toby Ott and Nick Bostrom. So we're really excited to be working with him to just to improving the way that we communicate the work that you all are doing in creating a better decentralized, secure, private infrastructure for cooperation. So very excited about that. So in the next year, one thing you can look forward to if you're interested is really individual meetings where we really deep dive in individual chapters of the book. In addition to that, we are also using those individual meetings to kickstart working groups on each of the topics in the book. So what I did in the background is just kind of like match made a few of you that are working on individual areas that we care about. For example, a few of you are working on fixing current economic infrastructures. A few of you are working on creating new sovereignties in the virtual world. So you guys are a working group and have already a meeting date when you guys meet. A few of you are working on better ways to improve our information ecosystem and really like learning from the old like Xanadu style prototypes of creating a better web of the future. So that's happening as a working group. Then a few of you are working on better crowdsourced ways of crypto funding projects that many people care about. That is a working group. A few of you are working on prediction market. That is its own working group. So we're really trying to take individual topics that we discuss in the group and coaching them up and kind of rounding you guys up that you where you work on the individual fields to make you guys collaborate. That also includes more the decentralized approaches to existential risks, which I think is still one that is significantly undervalued. We have now a few fellows, for example, one person who will join in the next meeting, Georgis, he's a fellow and he works at OpenMind, which is a really fantastic research organization for privacy preserving machine learning, which I think we need to get around much better. And we have Ben Reinhardt from the Future of Humanity Institute, who works on more decentralized approaches to actually doing privacy preserving approaches to actually create better ways in which we can monitor without losing privacy. So I think it's really crucial for us to make a case that in the face of rapidly advancing risks from technologies, we don't need to rely on the legacy institutions that may create more of a threat than they're solving, but we can actually have secure computer security foundations and on which we can build decentralized frameworks. So really excited to have a very strong computer security group in the next year as well. And Mark, we were discussing perhaps having a few of the more e-rights related technical meetings, correct? Do you want to share a little bit about that? So we're trying to get it a little bit more into an actionable focus on kickstarting a focus group on these topics.
Yeah, so we talk a lot about smart contracts. I think this is still all information and to be designed and figured out how to proceed concretely. But I think that the technology is to the point that actually having some tutorials where we get people started actually writing smart contracts and seeing how to use the technology to create systems of cooperations, new kinds of institution, et cetera, I think is something that the concreteness of that will be very clarifying, and getting people actually building things will unleash a degree of creativity, spawning new ideas that talking about these things in the abstract can't quite get to. So as well as the fact that some actual artifacts coming out of that might themselves become very important. So I'm very interested in seeing us catalyze concrete work using the technology to build actual smart contracts, but driven by the visionary goals of this group. And in that context, I also want to clarify something that for me was a aha moment at Vision Weekend, I think is worth sharing right here, which is when we talk about voluntary cooperation, and then we take a look at the world of blockchain-based smart contracts and cryptocurrency and crypto commerce, there can be an overemphasis on commerce per se, that of the spontaneous orders that come out of human voluntary cooperative interaction. Markets are certainly the biggest and most most obvious spontaneous orders to argue about and to but I think that puts some blinders on that's important to clarify, which is, in fact, human society is built of many interpenetrating voluntary spontaneous orders that interact with each other. And it's this whole fabric of interacting spontaneous orders that leads to much of the richness of human civilization. So, the my favorite other example is natural language, because it is the most decentralized, spontaneous order of human civilization, that there's no joint coordinated decision-making that's of significant influence in the evolution of language. Every time we open our mouth, we both consume the state of language and influence the state of language, and language evolves over time through all of those tiny little influences that we can't help but push and pull on every time we open our mouth and make a choice of what words to use to convey what meaning. The aha moment for me at Vision Weekend was in a discussion of open science. The whole scientific method is another interpenetrating spontaneous order that has a productive feedback loop from the market, but whose own internal logic is quite distinct from the logic of the market per se. Likewise, within science, I focused on the system of giving credit. When I read a scientific paper, however great the ideas in it are, if I feel like that paper is not giving sufficient credit to prior work, I think of less of that paper. Other scientists, knowing that their colleagues will think less of them if they don't give proper credit, give that credit. Credit, unlike money, is not conserved. You don't have less credit by giving more credit. So these things each have their own distinct logic to them. The logic of scientific investigation and criticism is also quite distinct, and these things together form the fabric of the emergence of the wonders of civilization. And I think that the technology of blockchain smart contracting needs to escape from the frame of commerce per se and be more about facilitating all of these forms of voluntary cooperation and their interaction with each other.
Beautifully said, Mark. I'm trying to share references to the book as you speak to individual sections. But yeah, I find myself referring to individual ideas in the book a lot these days when I have discussion, and I can't wait until it's hopefully out there soon. So thank you, guys. Now we are almost half an hour in, so we want to hear from all of you guys. And first, perhaps starting with our fellows. So our fellows, everyone who was here this year, we would love to hear from you guys. Maybe Kate, do you want to introduce yourself and say a few words about yourself if you're on the call? I saw you a second ago. Let's see. Yeah, Kate, you're on the call. Do you want to introduce yourself? Kate has been a Foresight Fellow, done a fantastic presentation. Perhaps you'd like to share a highlight and to share what you're working on, and then we want to popcorn out to the group.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry I didn't have anything prepared, but I agree wholeheartedly with what Mark had said. I think in, like I said, over the Vision Weekends, I think in the past 20 or 30 years, we've just had this explosion of different tools that we can use, technological tools. And with blockchains and with smart contracts and just with, public key cryptography, I think there's a lot that we can do when it comes to, interacting with each other, making credible commitments, being able to, as Jajir pointed out, being able to make self-binding commitments. So I think there's a lot of really interesting things that we can do. And I'm really excited about, the book that you've been writing, exploring many of those things and just building on top of that.
Thank you. Lovely. Next fellow up, David Mannheim. Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, so I have to say that this year has been fantastic, that I've certainly learned a lot, that focusing on cooperation in the abstract and thinking about what it is that isn't working has occupied a lot of my time, thinking about failure modes and what it is that we need to be concerned about. But I think that one of the things that I've gotten out of the group is not just optimism in general, not just kind of the idea that, hey, things could be better, but a lot of really specific details about how it is that we can use some of blockchain technology to solve the problems that we have, to really look at how it is that you would concretely address some of the fundamental issues that we have with commitment making and with building institutions that people can invest in reliably, and so yeah, that's been really fantastic.
Thank you. We also have one of our Foresight Senior Fellows on the call, Robin Hansen. What was the highlight of this group? You gave a fantastic presentation on Grabby Aliens. Do you want to maybe share a few words about that or about Vision Weekend?
Hello, everyone. I was just planning on sitting and listening here, so I didn't have anything to say, but I spent the last year on this Grabby Aliens project. I started last December and it got published 2 weeks ago. So that was my big thing for the year. But I am in generally like interested in institutions and social innovation in general. And sort of my one comment is it makes me a little sad when tech people are mainly interested in social innovation that includes tech, and then all the other social innovation that just sits there waiting decades that could happen, that doesn't happen, that doesn't need tech, just still sits there waiting. Because there's really are a lot of things that we know how to improve the world in, we social scientists, that the world seems uninterested in. The world's interested in stuff if you can use tech, because tech people are interested in that because they like tech. But anyway, that's just a little editorial. But grabbyaliens.com will tell you what you want to know about. There really are aliens out there, and we roughly know where they are in space-time. We have a simple 3-parameter statistical model that each of the parameters fit to data, and you need to believe the model to believe that why we're crazy early, because we're only 14 billion years, and the average star lasts 5 trillion years. So, but you can go there to learn more about that. But anyway, it's nice to see you all, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about all of your tech-based social innovation.
Lovely. I just shared a little bit of background on both Grabby Aliens and prediction markets here with people in the chat on your seminar summaries. You can find all of this here. We also have a few of our fellows in the next year here. For example, TJ. And TJ, you're working specifically on a comprehensive AI services model that's inspired by Eric Drexler, and that we certainly discuss a bit in our book as well, as we move into more cooperation with with artificially intelligent agents. So TJ, do you want to share a little bit about your work and what you're excited about to focus on in the next year?
Yeah, I'm TJ. I'm a research scholar at FHI, and my work is like mostly been about like two different like sides of the story. One is like trying to understand like cooperation with AI from economic lenses, from like how like things like classical economic theories of cooperation, like contracts, etc., like should need to like change when you have like narrow versus general AI, etc., etc. And the other aspect is then like how to think about these systems from evolutionary and like different sorts of like multidisciplinary lenses. And I'm like, yeah, like I feel like excited to be part of this group. I think that like there's like a bunch of interesting and correlated ideas floating around, and yeah, just excited to be part of the discussions.
Lovely, fantastic. Okay, Tom, you're also a fellow in our next year, and you have published a variety of papers, I think together with Mark as well. So perhaps you want to share a little bit more about your work, what you're interested in focusing on in the next year.
Sure. Thanks, Alison. Hi, everyone. I'm Tom van Cutsem. I'm based in Belgium, working for Bell Labs, and so general background in computer science, programming languages, distributed systems. As Alison mentioned, I worked with Mark in the past. Actually, we built a kind of smart contracting system in JavaScript, I think even before Ethereum was born. So it was way back in the day. And I'm generally very interested in sort of programmability of systems and how can we make systems easier to program. So in my day job at Bell Labs these days, I'm looking at how AI can actually help us get there. And it's interesting, Mark mentioned like natural language, because one of the things that I'm researching right now is, can we build systems that can translate from natural language to code, right? So can you codify requests that you make in natural language? So that's one of the topics. But generally, just extremely interested in decentralized systems in general, smart contracting systems, and hoping to learn a lot from interacting with you guys. And if all goes well, I will be at Vision Weekend this weekend in France.
Yeah, we can't wait to see you here. All right. Well, if any one of you would like to share highlights of this year, what you're looking forward to in the next year, we really welcome you to raise your hand and to just speak up. I think like one thing that the group really lives on is by people being really cooperative and kind of proactive in sharing the work that they want to focus on in the next year. I do want to, perhaps also prompt. Yeah, we have Blake here.
Sure. If you want to finish up, feel free. Did you have something else? Awesome.
Oh, go for it.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, thanks for having me. This is my first time in the group following this past weekend, so really glad to be here. I wanted to agree with a couple things that folks had said, and then sort of add something. I first want to agree with Mark. Moving from DeFi into sort of other forms of cooperation, not beyond finance. I think that's a really key point. And as far as this, making government more like language, right? The sort of decentralized version of that. I like that a lot, and I also want to. I've been thinking a lot of the limitations of language, that we find ourselves getting into these sort of epistemic wormholes where language can be used to obfuscate. And so if we can perhaps address the limitations of language, that might also get us somewhere. And this broadly moves into cleaning up our epistemic environment, which I think could be really interesting. The connections to social media. And one thing I've been thinking a lot about in not only social media, but also academic communication is moving beyond agreement on what is true to what we should do. And that's the type of epistemics that the economics community is more focused on, but science per se has not been. I want to respond to Robin. I know I'm going on a bit. That I agree that the tech-based solutions I agree are limiting, right? And I'd like to see us move beyond that. And my question for you would be what solutions that may not be tech-based, that may be theoretically based, right, with a computer science thinking, even if it's not code per se, but things that systems thinkers and sort of people who come from different areas of science and engineering might appreciate nonetheless. And Patrick Friedman had a nice quote about this in the city's talk that he gave, which was more about just law as code as an analogy. So what other analogies like that might we draw? With that, I think I'm done. Thank you all.
Thank you. Yeah, I think they'll also be joining the new sovereignties discussion and the working group in the next year. We also have Jamie Joyce here, who's a Foresight Fellow. Jamie, you mentioned in the chat that you're working on this project. Perhaps you want to share a little bit more about your work in that area.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so sorry to have come in late. We had some urgent issues come up. But yeah, Blake, I can't underscore enough the number of wicked problems with language in the deliberation and epistemic space. My work is with the Society Library, and we essentially work on modeling societal scale deliberation. And a lot of it really comes down to agenda setting and framing, and being very particular about not only deconstructing language, but the language that you're using in order to enable effective communication. At the risk of missing the whole context of this meeting, given that I came in late, I'll just say that I'm really excited this year to focus more so on moving from argument mining to claim mining and start exploring ways in which the semantic abstractness of language and terms that are entities in natural language can be used to generate syllogisms that can then be subsequently used to create informal proofs in the deliberation space. So very excited about that in general. And just continuing our work in modeling societal scale debates about topics like climate change and COVID.
I'd like to ask you a question. You said moving from argument mining to claims mining. What is the existing work on argument mining? Because I feel like argument mining is something that I've been eagerly anticipating for a very long time and have not seen happening.
Well, unfortunately, I'm not able to publicly disclose the company that we're working with that I believe has created the most sophisticated argument mining AI in the world. However, it's something that we've been given access to. And my understanding as to how it works is it essentially detects the argument structure in natural language text. And we also have another argument mining tool that comes from a university in Germany who also asked us not to disclose their identity in the use of their tool. But essentially, the building blocks of argumentation from the point of view of the Society Library is actually claims. So much like premises that are propositions build reason to justify conclusions, which are also claims. We're really interested in getting down to the claim level, since that's what our analysts deconstruct, and that's the fact-checkable unit, that's the most base unit. And then depending upon the language and entities that are in claims, that can be further deconstructed, and there can be claims derived from other claims in terms of what is implicit or what is implied in their meaning. And so we're interested, and we've been currently creating large amounts of training data to start using AI to break natural language into its fundamental claims, and to a certain extent derive what may be implied claims based on the context in which the claim is found. So for example, if a person is mentioned earlier on in an article, and then there is the word they that is subsequently used in sentences later down, to what level of confidence could we assume the they that is being referred to is the individual? Currently, we have to have analysts fill in those blanks, but we'd really like to move into start testing into reliable ways in which those claims can be rewritten so that they can be shuffled around and reformatted into different relevant contexts within deliberation.
This is fantastically important. As soon as we can hear more, I would love to hear more.
Well, thank you. I believe I'm a 2022 fellow, so you'll be hearing more. And I'm very excited to finally have a platform to talk about all the nerdy details, because normally when I give talks, it has to be very like high level, and we have to talk about the political applications of our work. So I'm very excited for this platform where we can talk about all that detail, because that's what I get most excited about.
Yeah, if you got the early hypertext pollinators before the web, in particular at Xanadu, but also Robin Hansen's LinkText project and others, were the central payoff that we saw for the upcoming world of hypertext publishing in large measure was enhanced extended navigable arguments as leading to a better evolution of society's knowledge. And ever since then, I've been disappointed at the fact that we haven't gotten there yet. So this is really fantastically important.
Thank you. I feel the same.
Mark, you'll be glad to hear that we reference Jamie's work in the book. In basically like speaking from Xanadu of like what can we learn from that for creating systems for the future. And Jamie has presented, I think, at one Foresight virtual meeting already before. Super excited to be collaborating closer in the next year. Okay, lovely. I think, yeah, the infrastructure is certainly something that I think was also we discussed at the DSI breakout that we had at Vision Weekend, and I'm really happy to hear that you're making such strides there, Jamie. So really looking forward to it. Lucius, you had your hand up.
Sorry. Hey there. Yeah, I wanted to make a couple of comments that might be thought of as on either end of the spectrum, but it's really a spectrum that wraps around. On the one hand, I do think that there's a whole body of mathematics that is relevant to this discourse that so far has not had a lot of representation. And part of that mathematics makes helps us understand sort of where Ocaps sits naturally, both in terms of a wider range of computational models, but also in terms of things like both types and queries. So the Ocaps is not just for security; it's for a much wider range of phenomena. But we can only discover that if you are exposed to this other body of mathematics and computing that has been developing over the last 30 years. So that's on one side. So I would love to see that enter into the discourse, especially in the Ocaps workshop. But also the other side is when I look at the range of coordination models that you're proposing, or cooperation models, one model that I think we must all acknowledge is incredibly sophisticated and has had enormous organizing power on human society, but is not mentioned in what you're talking about, is music. From the city symphonies to rock bands, I think we see that the music has an incredibly powerful organizing influence on society, but it also is fundamentally different than language in many ways. For example, in this conversation, we're taking turns talking. But in a musical setting, harmony is created when there are multiple voices happening at the same time. And this has tremendous power in terms of both being effective, but also unlocking other aspects of the human nervous system. So I would love to see that enter into the discourse about cooperation models.
Thank you. All right. So I wanted to, someone asked here in the chat, what is Ocaps? Mark, can you explain a little bit about Ocaps? And given that that is really a central point of your work and like something that you've been pioneering and something that in the next year we really want to draw more attention to, because I think one of the talks that really has blown my mind, certainly, has been your talk on computer security as the future of law, one of the first ones that I watched, and then your talk on Ocaps and e-rights, and just realizing how from very secure foundations, we can build a more composable infrastructure that doesn't only reach to computing entities, but they gradually can scale to human entities and ultimately encompass artificial intelligences into the mix. And so that is, I think, the technical layer that the whole book rests on. And so I would love to perhaps bring those people that don't know about Ocaps and that don't know about your work on e-rights up to speed here, because that will be a central thing of what we'll be trying to make more real in the next year.
All right. Since I've already have recordings introducing Ocaps from several different points of view, I'll take this opportunity to introduce a different way of introducing Ocaps, not necessarily the best way, but at least complementary to the other ways, and I think bring some new insight, which is historically both basic paradigms of access control go back to the 1960s and 1970s. I like Alan Karp's basic terminology for the central distinction, which is identity-based access control and authorization-based access control. But the historical thing I want to bring up is that of those two, the one that won so far, the one that became the one that was the basis for all of our mainstream operating systems, was the one that was largely funded by DARPA and was inspired by and driven to model first military security, hierarchies like secret and top secret, and then also security systems within an organization. And the thing about, especially in the military context, the central problem is perimeter security, is keeping the bad guys out. So the world is sort of divided into good guys and bad guys, and you're trying to keep the bad guys from doing damage. As we've been going, the OCAP perspective is one of fine-grained, individually transferable rights, which has a much more direct analogy with and synergy with the nature of markets. And so the historical thing I want to compare with is the approach that the financial world, prior to computers even, that the approach that the financial world, how they view the security problems that they're solving and how that differs from the military view of security. In the financial world, it's all about cooperating with those that you only partially trust and trying to limit and partition risk. It's not that you're trying to avoid interacting with those that you don't trust. Interacting and cooperating with those that you don't trust is the opportunity you're trying to realize. And to do so is never riskless. You're trying to bound your risk while you're doing that. So forming networks of cooperation for the purpose of moving rights around to realize cooperative opportunities when they can be realized, but do so in a way that bounds, where each party tries to bound their risk to the misbehavior of the others, not eliminate risk, is sort of the central perspective of Ocaps. And what we've done at Agoric is really taken that philosophies up through higher levels of abstraction of systems like the Zoe system built by Kate Sills, where we're applying that partitioning of risk at higher levels of abstraction, at financial levels of abstraction that are distinct from the OCAP level of abstraction, to very much build on the OCAP level of abstraction and apply its philosophy.
Thank you. Could you talk a little bit more about composability? I know that you've briefly touched on it, but I think that like one thing that to me as a layperson in the space was really interesting is how that actually scales or could potentially scale from the entities, from computing entities to other entities. And I think that is ultimately what gave rise to us writing the book, the kind of observation that systems of voluntary cooperation can not only exist across computing entities, but also exist across human entities and markets, and can perhaps ultimately also exist across human and intelligent entities if we scale the computing infrastructure up. So perhaps you can color that vision in a little bit more for us.
Yeah, so once again, there are multiple ways to approach this. So I'll just pick one, but please see a lot of the materials that we have up on the web and on YouTube, et cetera, that explain answers to this from other perspectives. But in Herbert Simon's Architecture of Complexity, Herbert Simon is a Nobel Prize winning economist and a pioneer of early artificial intelligence. His foundational essay, Architecture of Complexity, was like 1962. And he paints a picture that complex adaptive systems are ones that at multiple scales are interacting components that where you've got components interacting across boundaries, where they're somewhat separated. They are protected from each other, so they can, and then they have this abstraction boundary that's also to some degree a protection boundary between them, so that they can interact to fulfill greater purposes, while their insulation from each other allows them to separately evolve. The metaphor of the watchmaker, for those who know that, is all about how the abstraction boundary enables the separate evolution. And the systems that we see in the world, we see multiple people. A person is made out of multiple organs. The organs are made out of multiple cells. The cells are made out of organelles. Each of these things are separated from the things at the same level by semi-permeable membranes of various sorts. And seeing the world as these fractal systems of separation, of protection, and of attempts at cooperative interaction in the presence of threats to that cooperation, seeing those as multi-level systems, I think is one of the perspectives that's often lacking. Usually we look at a system and we stay at one level of scale in our analysis. We don't see that the same principles apply at multiple scales as these systems nest within each other. Oh, and object capabilities are supportive of this multi-scale approach to decentralized cooperation.
In what way are they supportive, if you just want to connect the dots?
Yeah, so I'll get quite specific here. My work on my early work was marrying distributed capability cryptographic protocols with language-based capabilities, where language-based capabilities are about very fine-grained protection of one object from another object. So basically as fine-grained as you can imagine a protection domain between two things in the computational realm, just individual objects in a programming language. Whereas cryptographic protocols are largely machine to machine, because within a machine, you can rely on cheaper technologies like a secure operating system. And the premise, the realization is something I like to summarize as you can reason about all suspicion as if you are suspicious only of objects. And what I mean by that is that you can have a set of objects on machine A talking over a cryptographic protocol to a set of objects on machine B, where the two machines are mutually suspicious. The cryptographic protocol is there because the machines are mutually suspicious. Neither machine is assuming that the other machine is well behaved. So if I'm on this machine, assuming the other machine is not well behaved, if I'm assuming it's not well behaved, then I can't assume that it's running its object system in a way that protects the objects from each other. If the objects are not protected from each other, if the object system itself is not a faithful object system, then what does it mean that we're in a system of mutually suspicious objects? And the realization is that from the perspective of the object programming I'm doing on this machine, my suspicion of the other machine as being a possibly misbehaving platform is equivalent in what I need to worry about to my ignorance of what the system of objects are on the other machine if it were properly behaving. And it's the cryptographic protocol that creates that equivalence. To put it another way, that the limit of the damage that a misbehaving foreign machine can do is equivalent to the damage that a well-behaved platform hosting a misbehaving subgraph of objects could do. And therefore, if I reason about it at the level of suspicion of the objects, I'm accounting for the limits of the damage that I need to worry about at the misbehaving machine. And it's that equivalence that enables us to compose across object languages at the fine-grained, object capability operating systems like SEL4 at the medium grain, misbehaving machines at the large grain through cryptographic protocols, et cetera. And it's this multi-level composition that in turn enables these systems insights about the nature of multi-level suspicion that allows us to apply the insights of Herb Simon about complex systems, allows those to take that. I'll just make a reference to something that I'll let people look up from this talk, which is my lectures where I use the Menger sponge fractal to talk about how applying these principles recursively at multiple scales leads to a multiplicative reduction in overall risk. And I'll just leave it at that for now. Allison, you're muted. I think you're talking.
Yes, you won't get away just like that, because here we have at least parts of it in the book. So I just shared it here with you guys also via Zoom, but here we have the entirety of what Mark just talked about written out very nicely. And so if you're interested in taking a look, then this is where I would direct you to. And Kate also made a great quick summary of just what it is that Ocaps is doing. So Kate serves as a Foresight Fellow, and I think built out the Zoe infrastructure at Agoric. And Christine Lemmer-Weber is currently is also a Foresight Fellow, and she is very much building on that to create decentralized social social media systems, in building up on the social media systems that we already have and adding a bunch of variety of different features. Okay, so that is perhaps also a good segue to ask Mark, as we close, how does that work influence your work at Agoric, and how can people, for example, plug in who are potentially programmers, developers who are looking at this and who are interested in directly chiming in and working on these projects?
So at Agoric, we're all about all of the principles that I stated, applying them, creating a software infrastructure that allows programmers to program according to these principles. But furthermore, the reason why we call the paradigm object capabilities is that it's in many ways very close to the abstraction and modularity principles that programmers, especially object programmers, already have come to understand and apply successfully for the sake of functionality. One of our slogans is that security is just the extreme of modularity, and that the result of applying this paradigm in the way that we do is that there's also to learn how to do secure programming in this paradigm. It's if you're already a programmer who thinks in terms of abstraction and modularity for purposes of functionality and composition, this is an extension of those intuitions. You'll find that these are really helping amplify the intuitions that you already have, as opposed to other computer security paradigms, which I would describe as a paradigm of security that's added to computation by other means. Object capabilities is not a security paradigm to be added to computation. It's a paradigm of secure computing. Furthermore, I made a bet that I'm just so happy is paying off so well, is having done research on language-based smart contracting for several decades, resulting in the e-language work in the late 90s and early 2000s. In 2007, I joined Google, joined the EcmaScript committee standardizing the JavaScript language, and got the enablers into the JavaScript standard, working with Tom Van Cutsem, who's on the call, and with others. Got the enablers for object capability programming, for smart contracting into the JavaScript language, and have stayed on the committee ever since. And now working with many others on the committee who are now interested in using JavaScript in this way. We are using JavaScript in this way. We've used these enablers in JavaScript to create a variant of JavaScript called hardened JavaScript, which is an object capability language, which runs on any conforming JavaScript that's just initialized in the right way using these enablers. And then we build our smart contracting system on top of that. The paper that Tom referred to that we co-authored, also with Bill Tulla, who's at Agoric, an economist, distributed electronic rights in JavaScript, published in 2013, the same year that Ethereum came out, explains why making JavaScript a better language for smart contracting was a good guide to making JavaScript a better language in general for software engineering, which is why we were able to sell these enablers to the rest of the committee, because of how well they also just enabled better software engineering in general. So the result is that we can bring in the 20 million JavaScript programmers and give them a much more direct route to starting to build these systems of cooperative smart contracts, make this something that can get uptake by a much larger set of programmers, and in so doing, bring all of this to the mainstream in a much quicker and richer manner.
Lovely. And if people want to chime in, they can join Agoric. Yes, he's nodding. Okay, well, I'm just trying to make it actionable for folks that are now like, okay, I want to, I like these ideas. How can I plug in? If like, I think the more concrete we can make individual pointers, I think the better it is. I think this group is really good at, providing a good theoretical couching. And then if people have specific, if you have, for example, have a specific a follow-up, then let us know.
Oh, I do want to mention one thing, which is Agoric is hiring. In particular, we are looking for software developers. We're looking for software engineering managers. We're looking for technical writers. So please check out agoric.com, find the careers page. And we are serious about, I've been doing this for 30 years, working towards these goals. I haven't been doing this just to create, better DeFi so that derivatives traders can have better derivative instruments. I've been doing this for a mission, and this company is motivated by these missions. If you're motivated by these missions and you have some technical things to offer, please contact us.
Lovely. All right. So it's agoric.com, and I'll share it again, I guess, here in the chat for easy access. All right. So this has been already going on 8 minutes over, but I feel like it always takes some time to warm up. And like this, one thing that this book and this group is really incredible at, I think, is casting a really wide net through people that work in the nitty-bitty details. And I think Tom, if you're still here, Tom Van Katzen, when we had our fellowship onboarding call, you were like, wow, this was really helpful, because I suddenly see how the technical work that I do fits into this larger framework of thinking a little bit broader about cooperation, not only across computing entities, but also across human entities, and ultimately across human and computing entities. And so I'm hoping that we can kind of, in that spirit, and move it forward in the next year as we get a little bit more focus and individual aspects that each of you are working on. So again, as a little disclaimer, next year we're going to continue with a book club about the ideas in the book that will be led by Josie and I. And we will have individual working groups on chapters in the book, where those of you who are working on individual items are actually getting together and are discussing your work and how you can help each other. And we have a technical track that focuses very much more on the decentralized computing infrastructure that Mark has been pioneering since forever and a day, really, and that I think is more needed than ever. But also now we have the tools that it can come finally online. We have the first, I think, virtual keynote seminar, which is tentatively accepted by Balaji on February 3rd. And before that, probably a group meeting, but I'll be in contact with you on more of that via email. For now, I just wish you all happy holidays. Thanks for many of you that I saw at Vision Weekend. If you're interested in supporting the work of this group, I do invite you to check out our Foresight donation page. Any work or any donations that you give would greatly help Foresight accelerate our plans and accelerating the work that many of you guys are doing in the next year. So again, here's a progress report of our the work that we've done this year and how you can help us in the next year. And for now, for the next 20 minutes, I will see you on Discord in a link that I'll share now in the chat. And then in 20 minutes, we'll be here again in this same Zoom room where we have a focused Q&A as part of our holiday gathering with our new senior fellows, Richard Muller, who recently joined as a senior fellow from Future of Life Institute, who's been doing fantastic work on AI, and with Georges, who is from Open Mind, and they're working on fantastic ways of doing privacy preserving machine learning. One thing that we definitely need to get around to because the other approaches are potentially pretty significantly untenable as we get to cooperating with more artificial intelligences. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining.